In a world shaped by geopolitical conflicts, natural disasters, and socioeconomic disparities, certain regions stand out as hotbeds of danger and instability. From war-torn territories to crime-ridden cities, these places pose significant threats to the safety and well-being of residents and travelers alike. In this comprehensive exploration, we delve into the top 5 most dangerous places in the world, shedding light on the underlying factors contributing to their perilous status and the challenges they present to both local populations and international communities. 1. Syria, the ravages of war and conflict. At the epicenter of the Middle East's protracted conflicts lies Syria, a nation torn apart by nearly a decade of civil war and geopolitical power struggles. Since the outbreak of the Syrian Civil War in 2011, the country has been engulfed in a complex web of violence, displacement, and humanitarian crises. The indiscriminate use of chemical weapons, barrel bombs, and other forms of warfare has resulted in the loss of hundreds of thousands of lives and the displacement of millions of Syrians, both internally and as refugees abroad. The ongoing conflict has given rise to a multitude of dangers, including targeted attacks on civilian populations, widespread human rights abuses, and the proliferation of extremist groups such as ISIS and Al-Qaeda affiliates. Moreover, the destruction of critical infrastructure, including hospitals, schools, and water facilities, has exacerbated the humanitarian crisis, leaving millions of Syrians without access to essential services and basic necessities. 2. Afghanistan, battleground of terrorism and insurgency. For decades, Afghanistan has been plagued by instability, violence, and political upheaval, earning it a reputation as one of the most dangerous countries on the planet. The country's tumultuous history, marked by successive invasions, civil wars, and the rise of militant groups, has left it in a state of perpetual conflict and insecurity. Since the ousting of the Taliban regime in 2001, Afghanistan has been a battleground for various armed factions, including the Taliban insurgency, Al-Qaeda remnants, and more recently, the emergence of ISIS affiliates. The Afghan security forces, despite receiving extensive support from the international community, have struggled to contain the insurgency and maintain control over vast swathes of territory. The persistent threat of terrorism, coupled with rampant corruption, weak governance, and socioeconomic challenges, has created a volatile environment where civilians are caught in the crossfire of conflict. The targeting of government officials, aid workers, journalists, and minority groups further exacerbates the humanitarian crisis and undermines efforts to achieve peace and stability in the region. 3. Venezuela, the collapse of governance and socio-economic crisis. Once hailed as a beacon of prosperity and democracy in Latin America, Venezuela has descended into chaos and turmoil in recent years, propelled by political repression, economic mismanagement, and social unrest. The collapse of oil prices, upon which the Venezuelan economy heavily depended, coupled with widespread corruption and authoritarian rule, has precipitated a severe humanitarian crisis of unprecedented proportions. Hyperinflation, scarcity of basic goods and services, and widespread poverty have pushed millions of Venezuelans to the brink of starvation and forced many to flee the country in search of a better life. The healthcare system, once considered among the best in the region, has collapsed, leading to a resurgence of preventable diseases and a dramatic increase in maternal and infant mortality rates. Moreover, political repression and human rights abuses have escalated, with arbitrary arrests, extrajudicial killings, and censorship becoming commonplace under the authoritarian regime of President Nicolás Maduro. The deterioration of the rule of law and the erosion of democratic institutions have further fueled social unrest and political instability, exacerbating the humanitarian crisis and deepening divisions within Venezuelan society. 4. Somalia, the perils of state collapse and lawlessness. Somalia, a country ravaged by decades of civil war, political instability, and humanitarian crisis epitomize the challenges of state collapse and lawlessness. Since the overthrow of President Siad Barre in 1991, Somalia has been embroiled in a protracted conflict characterized by clan-based violence, insurgency, and the rise of extremist groups such as Al-Shabaab. The absence of effective governance and the fragmentation of authority have created a vacuum of power that has been exploited by armed militias and warlords, leading to widespread insecurity and human rights abuses. The Somali people have borne the brunt of the violence, with civilians routinely subjected to indiscriminate attacks, displacement, and humanitarian emergencies. Moreover, Somalia's strategic location along key maritime trade routes has made it a hotspot for piracy and maritime crime, further exacerbating the security challenges facing the country and the wider region. Despite efforts by the international community to support state-building initiatives and counter-terrorism operations, Somalia remains mired in instability and insecurity, posing significant risks to the safety and security of its population and those operating in the region. 5. South Sudan, the legacy of conflict and ethnic violence. Born out of a protracted struggle for independence from Sudan, South Sudan descended into its own cycle of violence and instability following its secession in 2011. The country's transition to independence was marred by political infighting, economic challenges, and ethnic tensions, culminating in a devastating civil war that erupted in 2013. The conflict, fueled by power struggles between rival factions and ethnic militias, has resulted in widespread violence, displacement, and humanitarian suffering. Civilians have been subjected to targeted attacks, sexual violence, and forced recruitment by armed groups, leading to one of the largest refugee crises in Africa. Despite efforts by regional and international actors to broker peace agreements and facilitate humanitarian assistance, South Sudan remains trapped in a cycle of violence and instability, posing significant risks to the safety and well-being of its people and hindering efforts to achieve sustainable development and peace in the region.